Hey guys, so as you can see, the summer garden is quickly coming to a close and we'll be starting to plant our fall or cool season vegetables. But more specifically right now, since we're planting a lot of lettuce, I want to talk about something that can wreak havoc on your lettuce as well as some of your other plants, specifically hostas. These little varmints love to eat hosta and they will definitely go after your salad, lettuce, and other products. So what I'm talking about today is slugs and snails, specifically slugs. I really hate slugs, and if my wife sees one, she's going to scream her head off. So anyways, I'm going to show you all the different methods I know to get rid of them and 6 types of traps, and I'll save the best trap for last. The one I think is actually the most effective. It's almost the most disgusting to have to deal with, but that is the most important trap that I think works best. So let's go inside the greenhouse and we'll get started on talking about slugs. And we'll dive right into the first of the 6 traps, and it's one of the most common traps. Some people say it works great, some people say it doesn't work great. I think a lot of the time it depends on your garden and how often you change out the product that's in there and the attractant. So that could be the case. And some people let the watering of their garden get into this little container and also rain. So if you get a lot of rain, it's going to be diluted and not work as well. But the first trap is a beer trap. What you're going to do is you're going to take some beer, pour just a little bit in there. I hate to waste a good beer. And you're going to pour it in the base. And I'm going to set this out in the garden and I'll update this with a YouTube short. You're going to take a little bit of extra yeast, and my sugar is still in the kitchen, so I'm going to have to come back and add sugar to this. But anyways, we're going to add more yeast to our beer. We're going to set this out in the garden, but we're not just going to set it on top of the soil. We're going to put it at soil level. I'll take this outside and show you. It's already starting to create a little bit of carbon dioxide, but there's another trick. You're going to need this right here, as I said earlier about watering. So you want to use this as a protective cover for your beer. So let's take this outside and I'll show you how to set it up in your garden. Okay, so this is some of my cool season vegetables that we had a sudden heat increase for a few days there, and it did some damage to them. So I'm hoping they're going to be okay, but I'm going to probably have to replace some of the ones that have died. But we've got some cabbage and some broccoli and a few other things. But anyways, we're going to dig out a small hole and have the rim of the whatever size dish you have, we want the rim at soil level. So we're going to put that in the soil and mound up. Try not to get too much dirt inside of your container. Of course, if you have a heavy rain, that's going to wash it in. There's not a lot you can do about that. But we want to make it easy for any potential slugs or snails that are crawling around the garden to just fall into our trap. Beer, yeast, and sugar. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a couple of blocks and put on each side of our trap. Now this is going to prevent any rain, or possibly when we come out to water the garden, we want it maybe a little closer than this. So I'm going to push down on these where there's a very small opening. Now one thing I haven't done here that I would recommend you do is you water this spot thoroughly and just saturate the soil. Now the canopy to our little beer trap is set. It may not be perfect, but it's going to keep the rain from washing out our beer, and we're going to just replace this about every 3 to 4 days and see what kind of results we get. If we're catching them in here, we need to keep doing it until we've caught all of the slugs and snails that are crawling around our precious plants. Now the second type of trap is so simple, and you can get 2 traps out of each grapefruit you have. If you like to eat grapefruit for breakfast, this is perfect because you can just do this over and over. You're going to, after you've had your grapefruit, you want to use half of the grapefruit. So you scoop out whatever left in there, clean it out, and make a small, almost like a mouse door opening on one side of it to let the slugs get in. Set it in the garden. They'll go inside of here to congregate once the morning sun comes up. And also you want to mist the soil when you do this so it's very moist underneath. And so the next morning you can come out with a very thick pair of gloves on and dispose of the slugs that are hiding under your grapefruit. Seems silly, but it does work. Now the next trap is a molasses trap, and you want the same type of container, stainless steel or plastic. This is just a saucer for a plant pot. You're going to do the same thing, soil level. You're going to put some molasses in warm water, mix it, maybe 2 or 3 teaspoons of molasses, mix it up in the warm water so it has a chance to dissolve. I can get that out. Then we're going to add a very small amount, something about this size, maybe half a teaspoon of yeast. We're going to mix it in there, and that fermentation and sweetness will draw them into the trap. Same thing, if you don't want to use beer, you can use the molasses, and just make sure you cover it the same way. It has the same effect, and it might actually be better because of the sweet smell of the molasses. Maybe honey too. I haven't tried honey, but you could try that. So the next type of trap is super simplistic. There's nothing complicated about it. It's just going to be something like a piece of tile or a board that you're going to prop up at a 45-degree angle and allow overnight, they're nighttime feeders, but in the daytime, the slugs and snails are going to look for a cool, moist place to hide during the day. So you're just going to prop it up, maybe more like a 20 degrees, something like that, but it's going to be very steep angle up against something else, maybe a side of a raised bed or something like that, or you could use a piece of wood on this side. But the purpose is you're trying to get them to go into an area to nest during the day, and then you'll have to manually remove them every morning. And that's the disgusting part. But unfortunately, that's just what you have to do on this simplistic trap. But it can be very effective if you monitor it daily. So if you grow a lot of cabbage in your garden, the next trap is great because you don't have to look for anything but just the outer leaves of your cabbage, the big leaves. You're going to put those around the plants where your slugs or snails might be attacking, lay them flat on the ground, and the next day, same as with the board or the ceramic tile, you're just going to check under the leaves daily, and you'll have to replace these, of course, more frequently. But that might be a great way to catch them and dispose of them. And if they're stuck to the underside of the cabbage, you don't have to touch them. Just throw the whole thing in the trash. So before we get to the last number 6 trap, I want to talk about some of the key things you can do in your garden to protect it from slugs and slug damage. Slugs are voracious feeders, and overnight they can go through a massive amount of plants in your garden. So that's why you want to do these daily checks. Make sure you look under leaves. You can come out at nighttime, shine flashlights under leaves, on top of leaves, and just kind of do an overall search. My hostas sometimes can be quite damaged, and they're in pots that are, some of them are 2 feet off the ground, but they find their way up the pot, and once they get in there, they're going to eat hostas like there's no tomorrow. Now, as I may or may have not said earlier, location is the key to these traps. You want to place them close to the plants that are being affected so that you can pull them away from the plant and into your trap. So that's one thing to remember. The location of each trap is key. You want to make sure you do that. In a hosta that's in a pot, put 1 trap in each pot. Maybe this wouldn't fit in your hosta pot, but you could get something half this size and it may work just as well. Now, not every trap method is going to work for everyone. There's different variables all the way around, from outside temperatures to the amount of rainfall to consistently on checking your traps. So what I would do is I would combine all of these traps together and use them all in your garden or around the plants that are being affected the most. So if you can't bear the thought of killing a slug, and I don't know who would think that, but some people don't want to kill a slug, I would just plan on relocating them far away from your garden, maybe at a park or something like that, where they could spend the rest of their days munching on grass or something like that. But anyways, that's what you can do. The other thing you can do is using soap. You can put soapy water, put them in there, and that will take care of the problem once and for all. Maybe a slippery sided bucket, very smooth sided bucket with a lot of dish soap and maybe just about that much water in the base of it. The most common time to have a problem with slugs is right after a lot of rain. If you have a day or 2 or 3 days of rain, that's when slugs can be at their worst, when you have a lot of moisture in the garden, a lot of rain. So that's the time to set these traps out and to make sure that your garden is not attacked, because when you're starting your new plants in the fall or in the spring, that's when they're going to be really active, looking for those new plants that are easy prey for them just to take over and eat it all. Now, one thing you can do if you like to compost a lot of your kitchen scraps is take your eggshells and crush them, not to a super fine amount, but just where they're still, quarter, half, not quite half an inch, maybe 1/4 inch or smaller, and you sprinkle them around the base of your plant. This kind of creates a little barrier where they may not want to cross it. And also, if you have a lot of roses in your garden, don't throw those stems away. You can create a little fence maybe around the base of your plant, and those spikes and thorns also may slow them down as they approach your plant, especially if you have it thick enough. And it may take quite a few stems to do this, but that would be another thing that's going to last for a long time. I've came across rose cuttings a year later and the spikes are still very sharp. Now, after doing a lot of reading, I thought this might be the most interesting thing to do, is the copper tape trick. You can buy copper tape on Amazon, and I'll put a link down there. I've tried it. I don't know how well it works. I think it may be working because the pot that I used this on was a hosta. I put 2 strips of copper tape and separate it by about 1/2 inch. And then I put that around there. And supposedly, as the slug crawls up, it comes in contact with one piece of copper tape, and the second copper tape causes a microscopic charge of electricity, and it repels the slug away. Now, some people actually go as far as take a battery, like a 9-volt battery, and hook up one side of the copper tape, since it's in a circuit, and the slug crawls across the first piece and comes in contact with the second piece. I get that out. And it causes them to complete the circuit. So that supposedly works. I've never done that. I'm not sure how long a battery would last outside in the rain and things like that, but it would be an interesting experiment. But I've never tried it. But I have heard that you can do a battery on the copper tape. So that's something to consider. Now, diatomaceous earth is another thing that a lot of people talk about trying, and I think that diatomaceous earth is a great thing to use in the garden because it's perfectly safe. It's basically just ground up prehistoric diatoms or some type of seashells that's been mined out of the earth. It's a white powder. Probably the only dangers here would be breathing it into your sinuses, and even that wouldn't be tremendously dangerous. It just might make your sinuses irritated, or I've heard that it can make your skin dry the same way talcum powder can do that. So you might try the diatomaceous earth, completely safe. Just sprinkle it around the base of the plants that are being affected, such as hostas, your produce, your lettuce, whatever you have out in the garden. Try that, and this is one of those things that I use for other insects too: ants, beetles, wasps, other things that I don't want attacking my plants. So I'll put the link to this as well. But yeah, it's really a safe product, and I really use it quite a bit in the garden. So the old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and nematodes are the enemy of slugs, a very specific variety, and you'll have to look this up because I've never bought any, but I have heard there is a nematode that will attack the slugs. And that is one of those things you might want to try to use in your garden. You can order them. I'm sure they can be shipped to you. It's a little bit more of a complicated process, and I might consider it if I had a really big problem, but some of the other traps seem to be working well. So if they weren't working well, I would introduce these nematodes to the garden as well. Now, natural predators, talking about the nematodes, natural predators are also something else you're going to want to draw to your garden, such as birds, toads, things like that. They're going to eat the slugs and snails as they're trying to munch away at your garden. I would recommend putting up 4 bird houses around the corners of your garden to attract more birds to your garden, and that's going to help with some of the pests you don't want as well, in addition to the slugs. So try that, bird houses, and even if you have time to make just a small pond and a self-cleaning pond, you might put some pond plants in there. You don't have to worry about circulating water. It'll be a little tiny pond that will clean itself, and that will draw toads in, frogs in, that will eat these slimy creatures. Now, slugs love wet conditions. They love that type of environment, and it's the place where they're going to thrive the most. So what I would recommend, if you overwater the entire garden with a hose pipe, I would recommend doing that early morning and not late evening, because late evening is when they're going to come out and they're going to thrive and multiply. This is something I started using maybe more than 5 years ago, is micro irrigation, and I would put it at the base of each plant, and it really cut down on the slug problem in my garden. I would recommend going, if you have an overspray system in your garden, to go to this, because not only will it cut down on your slugs, it will also help reduce diseases from the watering on top of the leaves. In the daytime, you have the chance of the water causing problems with the sunlight. There's some controversy there. Some people say it does. Some people say it doesn't. At nighttime, when you're watering, that's going to cause diseases, and of course the slugs are just going to be in heaven. So next to my garden is a stand of trees, and I constantly have leaves falling, and I have to be vigilant. I can't always say that word. I have to be vigilant to clean up all the leaf debris with my leaf blower. I come in and get all the leaves cleaned up. And so that's another thing. If you have a lot of leaves standing in your garden, those leaves provide, during the daytime, a place for the slugs and snails to hide. So if you come in with a leaf blower and get rid of all the leaves that have fallen on the garden, you only have to do this about every 2 or 3 days, or at least that's how it is with me. Even though I have a huge stand of trees right next to my garden, that will cut down on the number of slugs and snails that are able to find a habitat in your garden. So the next thing to consider is turning your plants into the shape of an oak tree. If you've ever noticed, an oak tree has that mushroom shape, the huge canopy, and then just one trunk going to the ground generally. So if you can take your plants and prune off lower limbs, that will help as well. It'll make it a little bit harder for the slugs to get up and around your plants. Limbs that are touching the ground is perfect for the slugs to get in and eat every leaf they can get to and use that as a ladder to get to the rest of the plant. So if you can create that oak tree type of mushroom shape where you prune all the lower limbs off, that can help as well. And it might actually boost the production of your plant because it's getting more sunlight at the top of it. So over a decade ago, I got addicted to those little coffee pods. And so I threw away, or I gave away, my old regular coffee maker. But I always had coffee grounds because I would sometimes make coffee in the morning and sometimes in the evening when I got home from work. So that's a thing to consider, is coffee grounds, especially if they're caffeinated. You can put that around the base of the plant, and that can act as an irritant to the slugs. So you might try that if you're still using a lot of coffee grounds. For me, I'm only having maybe a teaspoon of coffee grounds each day to work with. But if you're still doing it the old-fashioned way, which I admire that because that's the best way to do it anyways, I'm probably using too much plastic and all the other crap that goes along with it. But do that if you have coffee grounds. You can just sprinkle it around the base of the plant you're trying to protect. So in addition to the coffee grounds, you might consider using something like sand around the base of the plant, especially sharp sand. And you can make a round little circle, like a donut shape, around the base of each plant. And that might also act as an irritant because slugs generally, they like moisture. And if the sand dries out during the day and they come out there at night, they may not like that, and that might drive them away. So just make sure you don't put too much. If it's beach sand, if you live close to the ocean, you want to make sure it's not salt-filled sand because that could really do some damage to your plant. But that's another thing to consider, is trying sand in a donut formation around the base of each plant. Also, you might try iron phosphate pellets. That might be a better idea than using the slug bait, which can be toxic. My wife bought some of the slug baits a while, I think it was last year, and she put them on the hostas, and I was terrified that my hostas might suffer some type of damage because I've been growing the same hostas for over 20 years. So I don't know what's in those. I don't know what the long-term effects are, and I don't know what it will do to your plants. Maybe nothing. Maybe they're perfectly safe. Maybe it's just animals that it's more dangerous to, birds or something, or pets. So anyways, I would try iron phosphate pellets rather than the slug pellets. Let's try that, and that might work better for you. So this one is one that I don't like the thought of doing because, one, it just takes a lot of time, and two, I hate the thought of doing it even with a pair of gloves on. But if you do nighttime inspections in your garden with a flashlight, sometimes you can, sorry, the bird's going crazy again, but if you can go out at nighttime after dark, maybe an hour, and start looking with a flashlight around your under leaves and on your plants, you might be able to find some of the snails and slugs and dispose of them by picking them off, putting them in a soap solution, or relocating them far away from your garden if you can't bear the thought of killing those plant-killing things. Now, a couple more things about the garden, and this is a good practice anyways for diseases, is to do crop rotation where you change up the beds and what's growing and where. That can reduce the slug population. The second is general garden hygiene. If you have a lot of debris or rotting fruit, sometimes you'll just be tired and you don't want to dispose of it. You'll throw it next to the plant. Well, that can be a perfect place for slug eggs to be laid and later on hatch out. And then now you've got the same problem, the same cycle happening over. So make sure you're doing good garden hygiene and disposing of dead plant matter and just putting it in your compost or somewhere away from the garden. So this one is quite controversial, and people are going to say don't put salt anywhere in your garden. But if you just can't stand any of the other situations or methods or traps or anything, you might try sprinkling just a little bit of salt on each slug and just let that do its magic. So if you don't like the idea of the traps or having to pick them off here by hand, you might try the method of a little bit of salt and see if that works for you. Now, if you live near an ocean and have access to lots of seaweed, they say that seaweed can act as a barrier. I've never tried it, but it is one of the things that came up in my research in battling slugs. Make sure you rinse it thoroughly and remove all the salt and put it around your plants. And they say that seaweed can keep slugs away. I don't know if it's true, but it's an interesting thought. And I read through that and I thought, well, it's possible. I'll mention it. Next, I was mentioning the slug pellets my wife bought, and I'm pretty sure they were toxic, but I don't know. I took them out of the pot and threw them away, and I think I disposed of the entire bag. But there is supposed to be a slug pellet safe brand, and I'll look and see if I can link that below. I've got so many other methods I can try first. That might be a last resort, but I will link it for you if you're interested in trying the safe slug pellets, not the toxic ones. Now, in talking about setting up barriers at the base of your plants, this is something that popped in my head, and I thought, well, maybe this would work because I've got a lot of these because I grow loofah myself. And you can put this in a triangular pattern around the base of your plants, bury it halfway deep, and these are so abrasive that I would think that slugs would not like it. Now, I haven't tried it, and I'll do an update once I do a few of these and see what happens. But unless you are filming 24 hours a day, you really don't know. So it might act as a good barrier. They're really rough on the human skin, so I'm thinking that slugs would not like these. Just put them in that triangle shaped pattern, have your plant coming out, like I say, no lower limbs, and make sure you bury this halfway so they can't go under it, and that might act as a barrier for those nasty slugs. So when I first started growing bonsai, I grew them, a lot of them in terracotta pots, because at the time it was the cheapest option, and I thought maybe this would be the best thing to grow them in. And of course, over time they cracked and broke pretty easily because the bonsai roots were expanding and cracking the pots, and they didn't do well in winter either. But this makes an excellent trap. A lot of times I would just set these off to the side, and I would come back and I'd pick one up and it'd just be filled with slugs on the inside. And I would think, how did they get in there? It was sitting and there was soil built up around the sides. Well, slugs actually find their way in there into the top, and slugs love moisture and dampness, and it's a great dark place to hide from predators. So what you do is you take a terracotta pot, wash it inside, wash it outside, take it out to the garden, put some soil in it up to about halfway inside, mix it with the watering crystals. I think I mentioned these in other videos, and I'll put the link to them. These expand, I think, up to 400 times their current size. They're like the size of rough salt or something like that, but they'll expand quite a bit, and they'll keep the soil really moist. So you put your soil in there, put your pot over it with this mixed in with it, and this will be a perfect environment to draw them right into it. Now, what you could also do is use a small cup in the center of the mound you have with some beer in it, yeast, and do the same type of trap. That smell coming out of the top will draw them right in. Sometimes they say putting one pot inside of another pot. This pot's a little bit too large to fit in there, but the small pot, same thing. But I think the soil is actually the better idea because it's going to draw them in there and hold more moisture, especially when you're using these watering crystals. So this is actually what I think the best method is. Now, once you catch them inside, once you flip it over and you see them in there, dispose of them. They're going to be all over this top area on the inside. They're not going to be trapped, except for the fact they could get out and they'll probably come out at night time, but at least you'll know you can dispose of them before they have a chance to go back out into the garden and go on an all you can eat lettuce buffet. Hey guys, I hope I'm in frame here, but what I wanted to show you is these were my giant hostas, and there is some evidence of slug damage here and there. You can see, hopefully that's in frame, but they will come out at night and eat on hostas. It's one of their favorite meals. So what I would recommend is you can see right here at the base, there's just enough room around the edge of the pot to set some of these traps up. So if you have a hosta or other type of plant that the slugs love to attack, put your traps in the pot, and that's going to cut down on the damage, and you can monitor those traps to find out exactly what's going on at night when you're asleep. So guys, that is the slug patrol control video I made, and I'm hoping that one of these types of traps or methods will work for you. Like I said, I would try them in a combination. I just wouldn't do one type. I would do many and see what works best for you. Not all things work best for everyone. So doing a little bit of a combination, a little bit of experimentation is going to help. And I just want to say thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Every viewer is very important to me. Every subscriber is very important to me. And especially comments. I love getting good comments, but I love critical comments because they make me think and make me realize where I've done something wrong and I need to steer the ship a little bit differently. So anyways, I appreciate it, and I hope you guys have a great day.